You've got the rear, your trigger pin, hammer pin, your sear pin, your next two pins that are interchangeable. These two pins are interchangeable. You can figure out where they go by the size, and this is just going forward in your receiver. And then you get to your roll pin, which is in the very front. And that's how you determine all your pins. We've discussed all the pins. Rest of our parts, we've got these two small springs. Remember, the larger of the two. When I say larger, we're not really talking much. It just so happens to be the space that it takes up. The springs are measuring the same diameter. And so I would say that these two springs are interchangeable, are the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, the part numbers on these two springs is the same, except for the trigger spring. The last two are AE, and the safety plunger spring, the last digit is Q. All the numbers before are the same, so they're the same spring pretty much. There may be some minute difference with it, but based off the measurements that I've got here and everything, they could be interchangeable. The one that appears to be just a little bit larger on all of its outside dimensions is the one that came out of the safety plunger, so that's where we're going to put it back. So anyways, if you were smart, you took your mainspring plunger and guide rod and you marked it to know up from down. It's pretty much built where it's symmetric, but because of wear, it's asymmetric. So it's a good idea to mark, and what I did was I marked the bottom of it, so whenever it is installed, you'll not be able to see it if you were to pull it apart, field strip it or whatever. So there's that. Safety plunger, there's your safety. Trigger bar, sear spring here. This is your trigger bar spring, and these clamshell together along with this little elevator to whenever the gun's racked, when it cycles, this will bring your round up from your magazine tube. And so now we're going to throw it all together. These are the three parts we're going to need to put in our safety plunger. And as usual, I'm using frog lube here. Brush some frog lube onto that spring. Get a little bit down in the detent hole and drop the spring in. Brush the detent. I'm going to get your safety plunger where it's got a decent amount on it. And we're going to go in from the opposite side that our plunger is. Now, I highly recommend a pair of safety glasses for an operation like this so you don't lose an eye with that plunger. Now with your thumb on the other side, you press the plunger and squeeze your safety forward, and now it's in. We're going to throw our trigger spring in, get everything coated with a good coat of frog lube or whatever you choose. With a frog lube paste, something that I like that I can do with it, or you can do this with any grease, take a little of that paste and get it down into that hole that the spring's supposed to sit in. And I can take that spring, push it down into there, and it should act as a glue for it while I set this down into its spot. There we go. Just grabbed a hold of the trigger and guided it down. Now that we've got the spring sitting in its home, we'll take our trigger pin, and it's the longest pin. Like a monkey screwing a football here. Once you get it started, it's a good idea to go ahead and check and make sure that your spring is in the proper place still. Make sure your trigger spring and everything actuates properly. Earlier, I believe I misspoke and I said that this pin with the little head on it was the sear pin. It's not, it's a trigger bar pin. The sear pin is of your like pairs, your smaller pairs here. You've got four pins where you've got two that are alike and two that are alike. On the smaller ones, the pin that has wear, noticeable wear all the way across it, is the sear pin. Notice how this pin doesn't have wear all the way across it? That is not the sear pin. So you get your sear pin, your sear, and your sear spring. So what we'll do here, the sear and the sear spring, let me stand up and make sure you all can see this well. That is the proper way for the sear and sear spring to go in. See this hole right down here on the bottom? That is the sear spring hole. Right there. I'm going to go ahead and get my sear pin. And get it sitting in there. Get my pliers. Now what I had to do was I dropped that down in there, and then I had to take my pliers and this end of the sear spring right here, I had to grab it down here and bend it up just a little bit. See right in there, that part of the sear spring, it needs to be in the up position, and that spring needs to be pushing rearward on the sear. Something you guys need to watch out for. Glad I caught it now. If you can see right in there, let me see if I can adjust this camera and get a little bit better light. That might be a little better. But if you look right down in there, you'll see the spring. That's the trigger spring. It's come loose. It's come undone. I'm going to have to pull this back down and get that sitting in its cup properly. Next, we're going to put our hammer in there. And this side here is the front of the hammer. And of course, the largest hole there, that is the hammer pin hole. You want to make sure that the sear is pushed forward. Now, it's not going to be really engaged on that spring too much yet, so it should be able to sit just upright like that. You want to get that in there. And run the pin in there. Now what that should do now is you should be able to take that sear and push it back and get it to engage and keep that hammer put, keep you from being able to move it. Now we'll go ahead and work on our next piece here. This is our trigger bar. What we'll do is move our sear forward. Now the trigger bar, be a good idea to go ahead and get some frog lube on these areas, because it is going to rub different parts of the gun. This is going to go into this round section. It's going to go into that hole in the trigger there. Now this section here is going to go behind the sear. So whenever it goes in there, you see here it's right there. We'll make sure it's behind this sear with it in the up position. Now would be a good time to get that pin with the head on it, and you've got this little spring right here. It's a teeny tiny one. There we go. Run that through. That's going to go right in there. Well, my bad. There's the way that that spring is going to go right here above your safety. Now that's the pin that was bent, so we want to make sure that we're careful getting it back in there. When you put this pin in, you don't want to drive it all the way down until it's solid. You can see how far that is sticking out there. It's not even sticking out, it's still recessed a little bit. You want to have that trigger bar, everything work like that. This spring keeps that trigger bar pressed up, and say that it cocks itself, that sear spring should make that click. You pull the trigger, it should let that go forward. Let off the trigger and it will reset. There we go. So that is your mechanism there. All should be working fine. So now, get your hammer where it is pointing forward, or as far forward as possible. Your spring and its guide rod, I mark right here showing that's down. There we go. We're going to thread this in the bottom. Now something I'm gonna see if my Smith tool will work for this. This is the Smith Master tool. This is for working on Smith & Wessons, and it's got a special end on it there. Get us to focus in here. Sorry guys. There's that end. And here's the other end. We're going to try and use this end, see if this will work for us. Because what we've got to do is get that spring pushed in. If we didn't do it this way, what you would do, well, I'll just show you real quick. Let me try this out first, because everyone's not going to have this Smith Master tool. See, it's got the notch in it right there. I'll push on the spring. Yeah, see that notch in there is letting me get the spring pushed down, and the pin is going through the notch as I push it down in there. So that will work. Another use for the Smith Master. Alright. That being said, let me get that out of there now, and I'll do it in a way that normal people with normal tools could do. Okay, you got your hammer there and the guide. Let's get that guide pushed up past and over its pin that it's supposed to be on. Then take that spring and feed it on up. See right there, it's up and over the pin and the hammer it's supposed to be on. You look back here, the spring's past the pinhole. Actually, it's just not quite there. Let's get it pulled on up where it's past that pinhole. Now it's past the pinhole, we'll get a pin driven in. Needle those pliers. Squeeze on it and just push it down until it snaps over the pin on your hammer. And now it's engaged. And no, my zipper is not undone. That's just the way the fold in these pants are. Meat gazers. You want to test? Now that you've got the hammer spring in, you take that hammer, pull it back, see if it locks in. Safety on. Shouldn't do anything. Safety off. Get your finger or your thumb in the way. Oh, slipped right on out. It definitely does work. Make sure that everything's in good shape. Yeah, whenever it slipped, my hammer spring was able to go on. It jumped out of place. That's why you don't want to let them slip. There we go. Okay, now we'll put this little spring in there. You see the direction that it's sitting. This will be the smallest diameter of the pins that you have left. Right down here. And this is a very simple one, or at least it should be. Just take your spring and slide it down and push it right on through. Now I've got this little clamshell set up here. So we'll take our left-hand side. Then our right-hand side. Say this is a good time to go ahead and get your roll pin in there. go. Got it into the first one. Whenever you hear it stop, that's because you can see how the bottom one is a little bit misaligned. We want to get that aligned. And as soon as we get it better aligned, the pin should go right on through. Just like that. Now those are in there. Now that little spring that's down in there is going to catch and ride on this little gap right there. So I say you want to put it in like that, let the tail go down, and then you need to make sure that you slide it forward so it catches. Take your pin and go ahead and get it started there. And whatever you want to do, pick up on the first half of that clamshell and slide that through there. Pick that up slightly and slide it through. Pick up the other half, slide it through. Now your pin is through. We have one pin left, and that is this bottom one. And it actually is staked on both sides for some reason, and I'll go ahead and restake that and then we'll test. You see right here where it is staked. We'll hit it again. Staked good over there. Well, our pin came loose. Beginning to think maybe that one should have been staked. Alright. There we go. I want to show y'all something in here. This spring that's down in there, that spring right there, you want to make sure that whenever you put your middle piece in, that spring, see the position it's in right now in the forward position, you don't want it there. You want that spring to be back there in the rear position. That way you can catch this little groove right there. Sorry, it's not focusing. There you go. You can catch that little groove. That's what you're looking for. Time to put the bolt back together now. And this one's going to be just like with everything else. I'm going to give everything a good coating with frog lube. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in advance. getting in all the crevices and everything, and then I'll pick up putting it together. Went ahead and got the bolt, and we'll coat these pieces as we go to put them in. This is your firing pin, and spring is going to fit right over the firing pin, just like that. Firing pin is going to go right in the back, and that notch is going to be facing that pinhole. You see your spring, your firing pin come out there. Get that notch lined up. And this is your pin. It's got a little head on it. Take that firing pin, squeeze it in, and you can drop that pin directly in. Maybe my pin has a burr on it. There we go. And that will take care, get that flush. That's your firing pin. Now for your extractor here, go ahead and lube it up good. Down in there, the slot, it's lubricated real good. Its spring, its pin. Now that spring is going to fit right down in here. Right down in there. It's not the best of designs. Got that spring in there. Let's try this again. What I did was I pushed the bottom of that spring from the front to get it to go in to place. Line up our pinhole to get it lined up. Go. Notice I wasn't driving the pin, I just had the pin down on this and was driving the rest of it. So make sure it works, and it does. Make sure your spring is in there nice and straight underneath there, and it is. And your pin is flush, and the bolt is now assembled. For now, putting everything back together, I'm going to make sure that we've got a good bit of lube down in here, because this is the action, this is the part where it's going to be running at. it's gonna be running. We get a good bit. That's your ejector there. You look in your ejection hole, you can get some lube on top of the ejector. You got a top feed ramp up there. You just want to make sure that you go ahead and get this lubed up good. Now, if you're using a traditional lube, I mean, I don't know, I'm a little hesitant to tell you to just douse it, because traditional lubes can be prohibitive sometimes, especially with 22s where they're so dirty. You're running frog lube, lube it up. Got your recoil spring guide rod here. It's put inside of the spring already. And now you're going to take your charging handle, and it needs to go ahead and get placed down in here. Guess we need to throw a little lubricant on it too. Don't forget the end. Go ahead and just get it placed in there. Now you'll take your recoil spring and guide rod, and this recoil spring and guide rod, it's going to fit right down in there. There's a recess down in there. That recess is right down there. You place it down in there. And now you gotta feed it in. Once you get it fed in there, you can actually let it kind of ride now. And I guess I'll just use these pliers this time. I'm gonna grab a hold of it down here. And you got to get this bolt back past the ejector that I was just talking about lubing. Once you get it past the ejector, it will fall down into place as long as your charging handle is in the right place. It's got to fit in the notch. See there? See, it's in the notch there. There we go. May take you a couple of times. And you'll see right there, see the recoil spring guide rod where it is. There's that. Now here's our action. Give this all another little coat of some frog lube inside of there. I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, there's a skunk that is so strong, it's so near that it's burning my eyes in here in the building. I'm getting ready to take my 22 out and kill it. Take your hammer, put it in the captured position and the rearward position. These right here have to go over your magazine follower. So slide forward. Make sure that everything's out of the way there. And it'll go in there. Here's your screw. I'm actually going to clean this head up just a hair. Throw a little red Loctite. Thread this mammer jammer in there. I said mammer jammer. What are you going to do about it? Mammer jammer. There, I said it again. Getting crazy now with all this language. You know there's a problem when someone starts busting out the mammer jammers. Make sure it's tight. I dressed up these two screw heads. They were marred up pretty bad. Re-blued them. Here we go. Put our forearm back on. And the forearm has to go on in order to actually attach or secure your trigger group. The screw has to thread into the other side of this. Let's see. There. Had to make sure I didn't get something hung up. I don't want to break this off because that's thin right there. A little bit of red Loctite is on there. It's going into kind of like a shit. I've just drawn a complete blank. I'm trying to hold this together. I'm going to stop talking right now. Put the thingy in the thingy. Late. Up making videos. Gonna go in and sit on my ass and watch Game of Thrones here in a few. Yeah, I've gotten sucked into that one. Pretty good show. I'm not all about the unnecessary random acts of nudity. And I'll just shut up there. Sometimes I feel as if it's unnecessary. No. It's not like I am at all opposed to necessarily there being nudity. It's just that sometimes it's like, what purpose did that serve? They didn't even look good. That was just nasty. That's quite often the reaction in a lot of what is called entertainment today, or these days. Now, we'll check our action, make sure that it cycles. See, that's the first time I actually could do that without just pinning that to check it. So we'll get the stock put back on. Which is pretty much as simple as that, and throwing this bolt in. little bit of Loctite. And go get the long screwdriver. Go. And the last thing will be putting our butt pad on. Butt pad. And just as in all the other videos, I like to take a little bit, not Loctite, but I'll take a little bit of wood glue and drop down in the holes. Small change here. I'm going to actually use a little bit of Gorilla Glue. Now, if you decide to use Gorilla Glue, it's fine, it works great. But remember, this stuff expands. And to really get the most out of it, you need to add a little bit of water. You want to dampen whatever the surfaces are you're trying to mate. But what I'm going to do is just let it expand some. Alright, guys. Now we know that's good. What we don't know yet is whether or not it will feed. And we'll test that out tomorrow. See if it's going to want to feed or not. But either way, turned out to be a pretty good little deal. And I'll give you a close-up on the charging handle that I made and browned it. Maybe we'll get some footage of it, of shooting it before I edit it out and post it. Thanks.